I finally caught Ari Aster's new film, Eddington, the other day, and I left the theatre the same way I have left it every time I've seen one of his films, which is, I kind of liked that, but I'm not really sure if I really know what it was about. It was so chaotic by the end. So many ideas, it kind of lacked a bit of cohesion. What's he getting at here? And then I've kind of been on my phone this last couple of days and I've been kind of applying it to the real world, and it keeps coming up in my mind like a good film should. And I've come to the decision that it really was a very perceptive film. And this is also despite the fact that I kind of went in thinking I kind of gone off the trail like I knew what it was going to be about. That it was going to be this sort of like, both sides have a point kind of satire type thing. But it ended up being, I think, a lot deeper and a lot more perceptive than that. And I do still think it's about a lot of things. But I think the main thing that I think I took away from it was, how can we be so sure in contemporary society, in this digital age that we live in, this crazy sort of Baudrillardian kind of like Frederick Jameson world where we've got hyper reality and so much imitation and simulation with our phones and all that sort of stuff and social media and everything like that. Everything's recorded. We live in this kind of panopticonic sort of situation that's enabled by all of us, weirdly. It's kind of like a self-imprisoning kind of world we live in. Given all these different layers and these interpretations and reinterpretations on reinterpretations of reality, how can we be so sure that the political activism we do in our own personal lives, in our own personal zones of interest, let's say, or spheres of influence, how can we be sure? Do we have enough knowledge, any given one of us as individuals? And I'm speaking as someone that isn't a billionaire, for example. I'm not a tech tycoon. I'm talking about the average person. How can any of us sort of be sure that our political activism on the personal level is having the kinds of impacts that we want it to have on the broader societal stage? And you could say that the film is a little bit too cynical, and the film kind of stifles progress in that classic sort of critique that a lot of sort of like neo-Marxists say about postmodernism, which is like, the more that you question certainty, the more you question truth. It's like that line from that Star Wars show, the moment you start to question truth, you sort of play into the hands of the bad people in society. I get that criticism, but I still think that we need to sort of shed some light on the fact that how can any of us really know that when we go out, and I think this goes for both the left and the right, and for any kind of political actor in the world right now, how do we know that when we hit the streets with our signs, or if we go to assassinate a bad guy, or if we jump online and make a video like this, for example, and maybe even go out and make a film like Eddington, how do we know that that's actually having an impact on the broader systemic level that is the one that we're intending, that is well-intentioned? And how do we know that this is being co-opted by sort of a more sinister, monolithic, but shadowy, hidden presence? And I think this is a really good example of a film that embodies the philosophy of someone like Jacques Derrida, who talks about how, this is more in terms of linguistics, but also just in terms of broader sort of philosophical concepts, how something can be present in its absence. I actually talked about this on a recent show on Films for Today. We did Charles Burnett's Killer of Sheep, and we talked about how it's the absence of the police, or the absence of the state, it's the absence of the social security system that asserts its presence in a weird kind of way. Like, it's not that it's physically there, but we think of it by virtue of it not being there. The fact that it's ignoring this given situation makes us think about it. And I think that's the same, but even to a greater extent in Eddington, where it's the fact that we keep asking questions like, who is that guy behind, not the COVID mask, but the balaclava? Who is that guy with the gun? What is that company? How come we're only seeing this for two seconds? Like, the way that it uses the corporate imagery in this 2.5 hour long film is brilliant. The fact that you never actually really get a sense unless you hit the freeze frame and you zoom in or you walk up to the front row, as I did in the theater, to actually check out what's that called, gold magic. Like the fact that so much is obfuscated. So much is filtered, that the fact that we never actually find out who's behind all this, who is the ultimate puppeteer, which does, of course, make people become things like conspiracy theorists, for example, because they have to, they need certainty around who's behind all of this and all that sort of thing. The fact that all of that certainty around who's behind all this, the fact that that's absent, the fact that that's not clear, is what evokes a kind of a presence of concern, we actually need to know who those people are. We need to know what that entity is. It's the fact that we don't know is what brings in the question itself. It's the fact that we never get to find out the answer that makes us turn our minds to what actually might be the more pressing issue, which is probably getting more transparency in the political sphere, in the public sphere, in public discourse. Who is actually behind this? I think it's a good thing that people are curious about what billionaires own what and what they're talking about, and that we have this fascination with who has control. We need to know the answers to those questions before we can sort of pick a side. And, you might agree or disagree with the film that maybe does, caricature some of the different political actors or the political side in this film. But I think it does give a couple of good examples of how we can have sort of personal turmoil. We can dealing with very human, very personal issues, very tales as old as time kind of personal issues, whether it's to do with, the fidelity of the people we love. That seems to be a common one throughout, like multiple characters in this film, and whether we are kind of sublimating that turmoil or sublimating those concerns in carrying out our political activities. And in doing so, privileging or prioritizing our personal issues or our personal anxieties or our personal troubles when we enter the political stage over what these broader the broader political implications of what we're doing. And sort of course, in a kind of like Darwinian state of play, if you are to prioritize your own personal goals by sublimating them into the political or acting politically to solve personal problems, you're inevitably going to be making vulnerable or being liable or potentially risking, is probably the best word to use, actually having kind of like ironic or hypocritical or, what you might call contradictory implications of what you're doing. The example in the film is that sometimes like the Black Lives Matter, one of the examples is the Black Lives Matter advocates actually do things that harm some of the black characters in the film. Or, Joaquin Phoenix's character, who's sort of like a traditional conservative type, who might stand for things like family values and community, obviously kind of tears down or eviscerates or fragments his community through his political activism. There's a little bit of post-World War II, do the ends justify the means element of this film. So I think I kind of walked away with a question, not necessarily with a new political stance, but a question, which is, when I go out into the world and I do something political, is it that I'm primarily trying to solve a personal problem and kind of using, and dare I say, exploiting political ideas to do that? Am I potentially trying to solve a personal existential problem and sublimating those issues by becoming a political actor? Or am I genuinely trying to serve the greater good when I'm doing something? And in asking that question, really the question becomes, can I even know the answer to that question? Do I have enough knowledge to know that I'm serving a greater purpose when I pick a side? When I'm sure that there's a right side of history and that I'm on it, can I actually know that I'm serving a greater, broader political purpose? And why I think going back into the real world has sort of uncovered that question that's dealt with in the film for me is that I've been looking at a lot of stuff on social media recently, and you do kind of realize when you look at it, so many of the current issues that we deal with, be it to do with the climate or Israel and Palestine or racial stuff or whatever, it does seem to be that there is money on both sides every time. And how do we know that we're serving the financial interests of the good guys? How do we know that the person who's making money through what we're doing is the person we want to be making money? I mean, that sounds a bit funny, doesn't it? Like, does the result always need to involve someone making money out of it? Is it more that there's a problem in the fact that someone is always making money out of political activism? Is it more the fact that there's an incentive for political action, a financial incentive for someone when there's political action? Is there a problem that we need to solve before we can even be able to be political in the way that we currently are? I don't know the answer to that question because I don't know enough. And I think that's kind of the root question or the root problem that perhaps we might need to turn our minds to having seen a film like this. But maybe I'm completely wrong, and I'd appreciate if someone wants to sort of comment and give their thoughts as well.